The champagne glass shattered first. Rebecca Krieger felt her heel snap, and gravity pulled her backward through a sea of designer gowns and $1,000 suits. Her arms reached for nothing, but something solid caught her instead. She landed hard on a stranger's lap, her red dress riding up her thighs in front of 200 witnesses. Heat flooded her face. Before she could scramble away, the man beneath her leaned close to her ear. His breath was warm against her skin. "Someone's watching," he whispered. His hand pressed against her lower back, keeping her still. "Don't move yet." Rebecca's pulse hammered in her throat. She didn't know this man. She didn't know why he was holding her. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something that terrified her more than the fall. He was protecting her from something she couldn't see. Before we continue, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Seeing how far our stories travel reminds us that meaningful storytelling knows no borders. Rebecca sat frozen on the stranger's lap for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. The gallows string quartet had stopped playing. 200 pairs of eyes burned into her back. Her company's board members stood at the far table, their faces ranging from shock to barely concealed amusement. Margaret Chun, the oldest board member, held her wine glass halfway to her lips, frozen mid-sip. David Torres had his phone out, probably already texting someone about the scandal. The man beneath her shifted slightly. His hand stayed firm against her back. "We need to stand up now," he said quietly. His voice was calm, like he caught billionaires in his lap every Tuesday. "Smile like this was planned. Trust me." Rebecca wanted to ask him what he meant. She wanted to demand answers. But something in his steady gaze made her bite back her questions. She forced her lips into a smile that felt like broken glass. He stood smoothly, lifting her with him, one hand on her elbow to steady her. To everyone watching, it probably looked like a gentleman helping a lady. Only Rebecca felt how his body positioned itself between her and the north-facing windows. "My apologies," the man called out the crowd, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "I should have warned Miss Krieger that I was sitting there. Entirely my fault." He smiled, and it looked practiced, professional, though I can't say I minded the introduction. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. The quartet started playing again. Conversations resumed. Rebecca felt the attention sliding away from her like oil off glass. Within 30 seconds, the room had moved on to other gossip, other scandals. But Rebecca hadn't moved on. She stood there in her rumpled red dress, one heel broken, staring at the stranger who had just saved her from public humiliation. He was handsome in an unremarkable way. Dark hair, average height, wearing a suit that fit well but wasn't expensive enough to belong at this event. His face was the kind you'd forget 5 minutes after meeting him, except for his eyes. His eyes were too alert, too watchful. "Who are you?" Rebecca asked. "James Felix." He held out his hand like they were meeting at a coffee shop instead of a crisis. "We should probably find somewhere private to talk." "I'm not going anywhere with you." Rebecca crossed her arms, then immediately uncrossed them because it made her look defensive. "You said someone was watching. What did you mean?" James glanced around the ballroom. His expression didn't change, but Rebecca saw his jaw tighten. "Not here. There's a service hallway behind the kitchen. 3 minutes. Come alone." He walked away before she could respond. Just melted into the crowd, like he'd never been there at all. Rebecca stood in the middle of the dance floor, watching him disappear, her mind racing through possibilities. Was this a trap? A setup? Some elaborate scheme to blackmail her? But he had protected her. She was sure of it now. The way he positioned himself, the way he deflected attention, the calm in his voice when panic would have been normal. None of it was random. Rebecca bent down and slipped off her remaining heel. She'd rather walk barefoot than hobble. Margaretchen appeared at her elbow, wine glass still in hand, her silver hair pulled back, so tight it looked painful. "That was quite a display," Margaret said. Her smile was sharp enough to cut. "Though I suppose any publicity is good publicity, isn't it?" "It was an accident," Rebecca said. "Of course it was." Margaret's smile widened. "Just like it was an accident that our quarterly projections leaked to the press last month. Just like it was an accident that your keynote speech at the tech summit got misquoted by 3 separate journalists. You've been having a lot of accidents lately, Rebecca. The words landed like stones in Rebecca's stomach. She'd been so focused on keeping the company running that she hadn't connected the dots. But Margaret was right. The last 6 months had been a cascade of small disasters, each one chipping away at her credibility. What are you saying? Rebecca asked. Margaret sipped her wine. I'm saying you should be more careful. Falls can be dangerous, especially for someone in your position. She patted Rebecca's arm like a concerned grandmother. Have a lovely evening, dear. She walked away, leaving Rebecca standing there with bare feet and growing dread. 3 minutes. James had said 3 minutes. Rebecca made her way through the crowd, accepting sympathetic smiles and concerned questions with practiced grace. Yes, she was fine. No, nothing was broken. Yes, these events really were too crowded. She picked up a champagne glass from a passing waiter, took one sip, and set it down on a table when no one was looking. She needed a clear head. The service hallway was exactly where James said it would be, hidden behind a door marked staff only. Rebecca pushed through and found herself in a narrow corridor that smelled like industrial cleaner and cold cuts. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. James stood at the far end, next to a wheeled cart loaded with dirty dishes. He looked different here, more real somehow. The practiced smile was gone. Your board is trying to kill you, he said. Rebecca laughed. She couldn't help it. The absurdity of the statement, combined with the stress of the evening and the surreal location, made hysteria bubble up her throat. That's ridiculous. Is it? James pulled out his phone and held it up so she could see the screen. It showed a photo of a bank statement. Rebecca squinted at the numbers. It was a transfer of $500,000 to an account she didn't recognize. The date was 2 weeks ago. This is the first payment. There are 3 more just like it. Payment for what? For me? James pocked his phone. Someone hired me to be your shadow, Miss Krieger, to follow you everywhere you go, stay close enough to intervene if needed, and keep you alive until a specific date. Rebecca's chest felt tight. What date? 3 days from now. The board meeting where you're voting on the merger with Castellano Industries. The merger. Rebecca had been fighting against it for months. The board wanted to sell 60% of the company to Castellano in exchange for an injection of capital. They said it was the only way to stay competitive. Rebecca knew it was the beginning of the end. Once Castellano had controlling interest, they'd strip the company for parts and dissolve everything her parents had built. Who hired you? She asked. I don't know. James leaned against the wall, arms crossed. The payments come from an offshore account. No name, no contact information, just instructions and money. I was told to keep you safe and to make sure you make it to that board meeting alive. This is insane. Rebecca pressed her fingers to her temples. My board members are annoying and greedy, but they're not murderers. You're wrong. Am I? James's voice was soft but firm. Think about those accidents Margaret mentioned. The leaks, the misquotes. Now think about who benefits from making you look incompetent right before a major vote. Rebecca wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him he was paranoid, that he was seeing conspiracies where none existed. But she couldn't, because deep in her gut, beneath the disbelief and fear, something clicked into place. All those small disasters, all those perfectly timed scandals, they weren't random. Why should I trust you? She asked. You're admitting you're being paid by someone anonymous to follow me around. That's not exactly trustworthy. You shouldn't trust me. James pushed off the wall and took a step closer. You shouldn't trust anyone right now. But I'm the one who caught you when you fell. I'm the one who saw the laser on your chest. Rebecca's breath caught. What? In the ballroom, right before you fell. There was a laser sight pointed at your heart. Sniper rifle, probably positioned in the building across the street. When you tripped, it threw off their aim. That's why I held you down. If you stood up too fast, they would have had a clear shot. The hallway spun. Rebecca grabbed the wall for support. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. She ran a tech company, not a crime syndicate. She went to charity galas and board meetings. She didn't get targeted by assassins. "I think I'm going to be sick," she said. James grabbed a plastic trash can from the dish cart and held it out. Rebecca waved it away, breathing deeply through her nose. The nausea passed, replaced by cold clarity. "If what you're saying is true," she said slowly, "then someone is trying to kill me before the board vote. That means someone on my board wants me dead. Or someone who benefits from the merger going through." James set the trash can down. "Could be Castellano himself. Could be one of your board members who's getting a kickback. Could be a competitor who wants to see your company dissolved. I don't have all the answers. I just know someone's paying me to keep you breathing, and someone else is paying to stop your breathing. And right now, I'm your best chance of figuring out which is which." Rebecca looked at this stranger, this man who claimed to be her anonymous protector. Every instinct told her to call security, to have him arrested, to handle this through proper channels. But proper channels hadn't stopped the leaks. Proper channels hadn't prevented the scandals. Proper channels were controlled by the same board members who might be trying to kill her. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Your cooperation. I can't protect you if you're fighting me. I need access to your schedule, your security protocols, your inner circle. I need to know everywhere you're going before you go there. That's asking for a lot of trust from someone I just met." "I know." James's expression softened slightly. "But I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to trust your instincts. Right now, what are they telling you?" Rebecca closed her eyes. Her instincts were screaming. They'd been screaming for months, but she'd been too busy to listen, too focused on quarterly reports and shareholder meetings and maintaining appearances. She'd ignored the warning signs because acknowledging them meant acknowledging that her carefully controlled world was falling apart. "Okay," she said, opening her eyes. "But I have conditions. First, I want proof. Real proof, not just a bank statement and a story. Second, if you're wrong about all of this, I'm going to police and you're going to prison. Third," her phone buzzed in her clutch. She pulled it out and looked at the screen. It was a text from David Torres, one of her board members. "Everything okay? So you leave in a hurry. Want me to call security?" Rebecca stared at the message. Was it concern? Or was it a threat disguised as concern? She typed back, "I'm fine. Just needed some air. See you at the office tomorrow." "Third," James prompted. "Third, you're going to teach me how to protect myself. If people are trying to kill me, I'm not going to be a helpless victim waiting for rescue." James smiled for the first time since they'd entered the hallway. It was a real smile, not the practice one from the ballroom. "I can work with that." Rebecca didn't go home that night. James insisted it wasn't safe, that her apartment would be the first place anyone would look. Instead, they went to a hotel in a part of town where billionaires didn't usually venture. The room was clean but basic. 2 double beds, a bathroom that smelled like bleach, and a window that overlooked a parking lot full of dented cars. Rebecca sat on the edge of one bed, still wearing her red dress, and tried to process the fact that her life had turned into a thriller movie. James unpacked a laptop from a bag he'd retrieved from his car. He worked silently for several minutes, fingers flying over the keyboard. Blue light from the screen reflected off his face, making him look like a stranger again. "Tell me about your board," he said, not looking up. Rebecca kicked off her shoes, both of them were broken now, and curled her feet under her. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Who hates you? Who profits from your death? Who has the resources to hire a hitman?" "None of them hate me," Rebecca said automatically. Then she paused. "At least, I didn't think they did." James finally looked up. "Start with Margaret Chun." Rebecca thought about Margaret's tight smile and pointed comments. "She was my father's business partner. When my parents died in the car accident 5 years ago, Margaret stayed on to help transition the company to me. She owns 15% of the shares. She's been pushing for the Castellano merger harder than anyone." "Motive," James said, turning back to his laptop. "If the merger goes through and you're not around to fight it, she probably gets a significant payout." "Who else?" "David Torres. He's the CFO. He came on board 3 years ago with impressive credentials, and a lot of connections in Silicon Valley. He's young, ambitious, thinks I'm too sentimental about the company. Translation, he thinks you're weak. Rebecca bristled. I'm not weak. I'm careful. There's a difference. I didn't say you were weak. I said he thinks you are. James typed something. That makes him dangerous. People who underestimate you are more likely to make aggressive moves. Next, Rebecca ran to the rest of the board. Patricia Hughes, the legal counsel who'd been with the company for 15 years and had 3 ex-husbands. Martin Okoye, the tech genius who rarely spoke in meetings but whose algorithms had saved the company millions. Sarah Keller, the marketing director who doubled their social media presence in 18 months. Any of them have financial problems? James asked. Gambling debts? Drug habits? Blackmail material? Not that I know of. Rebecca felt helpless. They're all successful people. They don't need money badly enough to kill for it. Everyone needs money badly enough to kill for it. James's voice was flat. You just haven't found their price yet. He spun the laptop around so Rebecca could see the screen. It showed a complex web of financial transactions, colored lines connecting different accounts like a spider's web. This is the money trail for the payments to me. It starts at an offshore account in the Caymans, then bounces through 3 shell corporations before landing in my account. Whoever set this up knows what they're doing. Can you trace it back? I'm trying, but it's going to take time, and we don't have much of that. He pointed to a date circled in red on a calendar widget. 3 days. That's when the board votes. If you're dead before then, the merger goes through automatically because you won't be there to block it. Your shares get divided according to your will, which I'm guessing doesn't give any single person enough power to stop the vote. Rebecca's stomach turned. My shares go to a trust. The board members are the trustees until my heir comes of age. You have a child? No, it's a standard clause. If I die without children, the shares stay in trust for 10 years, then get distributed to charity. She saw James's expression darken. What? That means the board controls your shares if you die. They vote as a block. The merger definitely goes through. He closed the laptop. We need to figure out who hired me, and we need to do it fast. Because if they're paying me to protect you, there's a reason. And I don't think it's because they're feeling generous. Rebecca stood up and paced to the window. The parking lot was mostly empty now, just a few cars under flickering streetlights. Everything looked normal, but she knew now that normal was an illusion. What if we're thinking about this wrong? She said slowly. What if whoever hired you isn't trying to protect me from a board? What if they're protecting me from someone else entirely? James considered this. You think there's another player? I don't know, but you said yourself that we don't know who's paying you or why. Maybe the threat isn't coming from inside the company. Maybe it's external. Castellano? Rebecca turned away from a window. He has the most to gain from the merger. If it goes through, he gets access to all our patents, all our research, all our clients. He's been trying to acquire us for 2 years. What if he's tired of waiting? James opened his laptop again and started typing. Antonio Castellano, age 57, net worth approximately $8 billion, built his fortune in telecommunications, expanded into tech, known for aggressive acquisition strategies. There are rumors he's connected to organized crime, but nothing proven. He paused, reading. His company's stock has been dropping for the last year. Analysts say he needs a major win to stay competitive. So he has motive to want the merger. But does he have motive to kill you? You're the one blocking it. If you're dead, the merger happens. Why would he hire me to keep you alive? It was a good question. Rebecca didn't have an answer. They worked through the night, drinking bad coffee from the hotel's lobby and building theories they couldn't prove. By dawn, Rebecca's eyes burned and her brain felt like cotton. James looked exactly the same as he had hours earlier, alert and focused. You should sleep, he said. We have a long day ahead. What are we doing today? I'm going to teach you not to die. You're going to learn how to spot threats, how to react under pressure, and how to fight back if necessary. He handed her a bottle of water. But first, you need rest. I'll take first watch. Rebecca wanted to argue that she didn't need a babysitter. but her body betrayed her. She collapsed onto one of the beds, fully clothed, and was asleep before her head hit the pillow. She dreamed about her parents' car accident. She was 17 again, sitting in the police station while a sympathetic officer explained that the brake lines had failed. Tragic accident. Could happen to anyone. Her mother's car had plunged off a mountain road, killing both parents instantly. Rebecca had believed it was an accident for 5 years. Now, in the dream, she watched the car fall in slow motion. She saw another car parked on the shoulder of the road, saw a figure standing beside it watching. The figure turned toward her, and Rebecca tried to see their face, but the dream dissolved into darkness. She woke up gasping. James was sitting in a chair by the window, his laptop balanced on his knees. Morning light filtered through the cheap curtains. He looked over at her. Bad dream. Rebecca sat up, her red dress wrinkled beyond repair. My parents' accident. I was dreaming about it. The car accident that made you CEO. I never wanted to be CEO. I wanted to finish college, work my way up, learn the business properly. Rebecca's throat was tight. They died on their way to my college graduation. They never got to see me walk across that stage. James was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Have you ever questioned whether it was really an accident?" The question hit Rebecca like a slap. She opened her mouth to say of course it was an accident, that the police investigated, that brake lines fail sometimes. But the word stuck in her throat. "Why would you ask that?" she whispered. "Because I've been thinking about patterns. The accident started after your parents died. The leaks, the scandals, the attempts to undermine you. What if it's all connected? What if someone's been trying to take your company away from you since the moment you inherited it?" Rebecca's hands started shaking. She pressed them against her knees to make them stop. "You're saying someone murdered my parents. I'm saying it's worth investigating." Before Rebecca could respond, James's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and his expression changed. "We have a problem." He turned the laptop toward her. The screen showed a news website with a breaking story. Krieger Industries CEO under investigation for financial fraud. Rebecca felt the room tilt. She grabbed the laptop and read the article. It claimed that investigators had uncovered evidence of Rebecca funneling company money into personal accounts, falsifying quarterly reports, and manipulating stock prices. The evidence included bank statements, emails, and testimony from anonymous company insiders. All of it was fake. Rebecca knew it was fake because she'd never done any of those things. But it looked real. Whoever created this had access to internal systems, confidential documents, and enough technical skill to make fiction look like fact. "They're destroying me," she said quietly. "If the story gains traction, I'll be forced out before the board meeting. They won't even need to kill me." James took the laptop back and started typing furiously. These documents were uploaded to a file-sharing site 3 hours ago. Someone leaked them to 6 different news outlets simultaneously. This was coordinated. "Can you trace who uploaded them?" "I can try." His fingers flew over the keys. Minutes passed. Rebecca watched the news story spread across social media, watched her reputation crumble in real time. Her phone started ringing. Investors, journalists, board members pretending to be concerned. She turned her phone off. "Got something," James said. His voice was strange. The files were uploaded from an IP address registered to a company called Meridian Solutions. Want to guess who owns Meridian Solutions? Rebecca shook her head. "It's a subsidiary of Castellano Industries." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Castellano was the threat. He'd been the threat all along. He was manufacturing a scandal to force her out, paying James to keep her alive just long enough to be humiliated and destroyed publicly, and probably planning to swoop in as a savior who restored order to the chaos. "I'm going to kill him," Rebecca said. "Not if his people kill you first." James closed the laptop. "We need to move. If Castellano's people leak your location to the press, they leaked it to worse people too. Pack up. We're leaving." Rebecca didn't have anything to pack except her broken shoes and her phone. She grabbed both and followed James out of the hotel room. They took the stairs instead of the elevator, James checking every corner before letting her pass. They were halfway down when Rebecca heard footsteps above them, moving fast. James heard them too. He grabbed her arm and pulled her against the wall. "When I say run, you run," he whispered. "Don't look back. Don't stop. There's an exit on the ground floor that leads to the parking lot. My car is a gray sedan, 3rd row. Get in and lock the doors. What about you? I'll be right behind you." The footsteps were getting closer. Rebecca's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd never been in danger before, not real danger. She'd lived her whole life insulated by money and privilege. Now she was standing in a stairwell, waiting to run for her life. "Run," James said. Rebecca ran. She took the stairs 2 at a time, her bare feet slapping against concrete. Behind her, she heard voices, footsteps, a crash that might have been a door slamming. She didn't look back. James had told her not to look back. The exit appeared. Rebecca slammed through it into bright morning sunlight. The parking lot was empty except for a few cars and a garbage truck at the far end. She spotted the gray sedan and sprinted toward it, her lungs burning. She reached the car and grabbed the door handle. Locked. She banged on the window, panic rising, before remembering James had the keys. She pressed herself against the car and looked back toward the hotel entrance. James burst through the door, running flat out. Behind him, 2 men in dark clothing followed. They weren't running. They were aiming. Rebecca screamed a warning. James dug behind a parked van just as gunfire cracked through the morning air. Bullets sparked off pavement. The garbage truck's driver hit the gas and roared away, leaving Rebecca exposed in the middle of the parking lot. This was insane. This was impossible. People didn't shoot at each other in hotel parking lots at 8 in the morning, except they did. Because here she was, crouched beside a gray sedan, watching hired killers try to murder the man who'd been protecting her. James rolled out from behind the van and returned fire with a gun Rebecca hadn't known he had. One of the attackers went down. The other dug behind a concrete pillar and kept shooting. "Keys!" Rebecca screamed. "Throw me the keys." James looked at her like she was crazy. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out his keys, and threw them in a high arc over the parking lot. Rebecca jumped and caught them, her hands barely functioning through the adrenaline. She unlocked the car, threw herself into the driver's seat, and started the engine. She'd never done anything like this before. She'd never even gotten a speeding ticket. But she gunned the engine and drove straight toward the concrete pillar where the second attacker was hiding. He jumped out of the way, giving James time to run for the car. He dove into the passenger seat. "Drive." Rebecca drove. She peeled out of the parking lot, tires screaming, and merged into traffic doing 60 in a 35 zone. Behind them, no one followed. Either they'd lost them or the attackers had given up. "Are you okay?" Rebecca asked. Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "I'm fine." James was checking his gun, ejecting the magazine, examining it. That was good driving. That was terrible driving. "I almost hit 3 parked cars." "But you didn't. You trusted your instincts and you acted." He looked at her, and for the first time since they'd met, he smiled a real smile. "You're tougher than you think, Miss Krieger." Rebecca's hands were shaking so badly, she could barely grip the steering wheel. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe while I figure out our next move." James pulled out his phone and started typing one-handed. "We need to identify who hired me. If it's not Castellano trying to protect his investment, then who? Who benefits from keeping you alive when everyone else seems to want you dead?" Rebecca didn't have an answer, but as she drove through morning traffic, her red dress torn and dirty, her feet bare, her life in ruins, she made herself a promise. She was going to find out. She was going to find out who killed her parents, who was trying to kill her, and who was playing games with her life. And then she was going to make them pay. If you're still watching, this story has you. You're curious about what comes next. Most people enjoy stories like this and disappear without subscribing, but if this one truly matters to you, take a moment to hit subscribe. Otherwise, you might miss how this story ends, and all the others still waiting to be told. They drove for an hour, heading north out of the city into countryside Rebecca barely recognized. James directed her to take random exits and double back several times to make sure they weren't followed. Finally, he had her pull into an old truck stop that looked like it had been forgotten by time. "We need information," James said, getting out of the car. "And I know someone who might have it. Wait here." "No." Rebecca killed the engine and got out too. "I'm not sitting in a car while people are trying to kill me. If you're talking to someone, I'm coming with you." James looked like he wanted to argue. Then he shrugged. "Fine, but let me do the talking. The person we're meeting doesn't trust easy." They walked past rusted gas pumps and a diner with a flickering neon sign that read Rosie's. The parking lot held exactly 3 vehicles: a semi-truck with a sleeping driver visible in the cab, a motorcycle with more rust than chrome, and a black SUV that looked too expensive for this place. James walked toward the SUV. The driver's door opened and a woman stepped out. She was in her 60s, with steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that could freeze water. She wore a perfectly tailored black suit despite the heat. "Felix," the woman said. Her voice was clipped, professional. "You're making a habit of calling in favors." "I wouldn't if it wasn't important, Director." James stopped a respectful distance away. "This is Rebecca Krieger. She's the client I told you about." The woman's gaze shifted to Rebecca, and Rebecca felt evaluated in an instant. "Ms. Krieger, I followed your career with interest. Your parents were remarkable people." "You knew my parents?" Rebecca asked. "I knew of them. I'm Director Sarah Keller. I run a private security firm that specializes in corporate protection." She paused. "I'm also on your board of directors, but I suspect you already guessed that from my name." Rebecca's stomach dropped. Sarah Keller, the marketing director who doubled their social media presence. Except apparently that wasn't all she was. "You're a plant," Rebecca said. "The whole time you were spying on us." "I prefer the term monitoring." Sarah's expression didn't change. "Your parents hired my firm 20 years ago to provide discreet security oversight. When they died, the contract passed to you. I took a position on the board to maintain close access." James stepped between them. "Director, I need information on the offshore account funding my protection detail. Can you trace it?" "I can. I already have." Sarah pulled out a tablet from the SUV and handed it to James. "The account belongs to someone you both know. Someone who's been very careful to stay hidden for the last 5 years." Rebecca looked at the screen over James's shoulder. It showed a photograph of a man, perhaps 60 years old, with kind eyes and graying hair. Rebecca recognized him immediately. "Robert Halverson," she whispered. "But he's dead." "No," Sarah said quietly. "He's very much alive. And he's the one who hired James to protect you." Robert Halverson had been her parents' best friend and business partner. He'd been like an uncle to Rebecca, always bringing her presents on her birthday, always ready with advice when she needed it. He'd been in the car with her parents the night they died. The police had reported 3 casualties. "I went to his funeral," Rebecca said. Her voice sounded hollow. "I gave a eulogy." "You went to a funeral for a closed casket." Sarah took the tablet back. "The body inside was never identified because there was no body. Robert survived the crash. He went into hiding and has been operating in the shadows ever since." "Why?" Rebecca felt like the ground was dissolving beneath her feet. "Why would he fake his death? Why would he hide from me?" "Because he knows who caused the accident that killed your parents," James said slowly, reading something on his phone. "And he's been trying to protect you from them ever since." Sarah nodded. "Robert discovered that the crash wasn't an accident. The brake lines were cut. Someone wanted your parents dead. When Robert tried to investigate, he became a target too. The only way to survive was to disappear." Rebecca sat down hard on the SUV's bumper. Her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. Everything she believed about her parents' death was a lie. Everything she'd mourned for 5 years was built on murder and deception. "Who did it?" she asked. "Who killed them?" That's what Robert has been trying to discover. Sarah crouched down so she was eye level with Rebecca. He's been working for 5 years to piece together evidence. He's been funding protective details for you, monitoring your board meetings, following the money trails. And he's finally found the answer. Tell me? Sarah hesitated. Then she said, It's Margaret Chun. The name hit like a physical blow. Margaret, her father's partner. The woman who'd stayed to help transition the company. The woman who'd been pushing for the merger. Why? Rebecca's voice broke. Why would she kill them? Because your father discovered she'd been embezzling from the company for years. Millions of dollars, carefully hidden in offshore accounts and shell corporations. He confronted her the day before the accident. He was planning to go to the authorities the next day. Sarah's expression was grim. Margaret hired someone to sabotage the car. She didn't know Robert was going to be in the vehicle that night. When he survived and went into hiding, she assumed he died too. She never knew he was still alive until recently. James was pacing now, his phone pressed to his ear. I've got eyes on Halverson's location. He's been staying in a safe house about 50 miles from here. We need to move him before Margaret figures out he's alive. Too late, Sarah said. She was looking at her own phone, her face pale. Margaret just made a large withdrawal from one of her hidden accounts. $500,000. That's hiring an assassin money. Rebecca stood up. The world had stopped spinning. Everything was clear now. Crystal clear. Margaret's going to kill Robert, just like she'd kill my parents. And she's going to kill me too if I don't stop her. We need to get to Robert first, James said. If we can extract him and get him to testify. No. Rebecca's voice was hard. We're not running anymore. We're going to Margaret. We're going to confront her. We're going to make her confess. And then we're going to destroy her. Sarah and James exchanged looks. Then Sarah nodded slowly. All right, but we do this smart. Margaret has resources. She has connections. If we're going to take her down, we need leverage. We have Robert, Rebecca said. We have evidence. What else do we need? We need her to incriminate herself on record. Sarah was already typing on her tablet. I can arrange for surveillance equipment. Wire you up so that everything Margaret says is recorded. But you'll need to get her to confess to the murders. Think you can do that? Rebecca thought about her parents, about the funeral she'd attended at 17, crying so hard she could barely stand, about 5 years of believing it was an accident, about Margaret's false sympathy and hidden smiles. Yes, she said, I can do that. They drove back to the city in Sarah's SUV, formulating a plan. Rebecca would call Margaret and request an emergency board meeting at the company headquarters. Margaret wouldn't suspect anything. Emergency meetings weren't unusual, especially with the financial fraud story breaking. Rebecca would confront her in the boardroom where everything had started, where her parents had built their empire, where Margaret had poisoned it from within. James would be in position as security backup. Sarah would monitor from an unmarked van outside. Robert Halverson would be brought from his safe house to testify if necessary, though they hoped it wouldn't come to that. The goal was a recorded confession. Clean, simple, devastating. They stopped at a hotel so Rebecca could shower and change into proper clothes. She couldn't confront Margaret in a torn red dress and bare feet. She needed armor. She chose a black suit her mother used to wear, perfectly tailored, elegant but severe. When she looked in the mirror, she saw her mother staring back. The resemblance had always been there, but today it felt like strength. Sarah fitted her with a wire, so small it was invisible beneath her shirt. It's voice activated. Everything you say will be recorded. Everything Margaret says will be evidence. She handed Rebecca a small device that looked like a car key fob. Emergency panic button. Press it twice if you're in danger. We'll be there in 30 seconds. Rebecca slipped the device into her pocket. I won't need it. Probably not. But take it anyway. Desperate people do desperate things. By 5 o'clock, everything was in place. Rebecca stood outside her company's building, her parents' building, and looked up at the glass tower stretching into the evening sky. She walked through these doors 1,000 times. But today felt different. Today felt final. She went inside. The lobby was quiet. Most employees had gone home for the day. Rebecca's heels clicked against marble as she walked to the private elevator that led to the executive floor. The boardroom was on the top level, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. It was where her parents had hosted their final board meeting before they died. The elevator doors opened. Rebecca stepped out into the hallway lined with portraits of company founders and past executives. Her parents smiled at her from matching frames. She paused in front of their picture, studying her father's kind eyes and her mother's confident smile. "I'm going to fix this," she whispered to them. "I promise." The boardroom door was ajar. Rebecca pushed it open. Margaret Chin sat at the head of the conference table, reading something on her tablet. She looked up when Rebecca entered, and her expression flickered, surprise, calculation, concern, before settling on polite welcome. "Rebecca, I got your message about the emergency meeting. Though I must say, the timing is unfortunate given the fraud allegations." Margaret set her tablet down. "We should discuss crisis management strategies. Perhaps a leave of absence while the investigation proceeds." "I know what you did," Rebecca interrupted. She stayed by the door, arms crossed. "I know about the embezzlement. I know you killed my parents to cover it up. And I know you've been trying to kill me. So the Castellano merger goes through without opposition." Margaret's face went very still. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Margaret laughed. It was a strange sound, brittle and hollow. "That's quite an accusation, dear. Do you have any proof?" "I have 5 years of financial records showing systematic theft. I have testimony from a witness who survived the car crash. And I have a trail of payments you've made to hired assassins." Rebecca stepped into the room, letting the door close behind her. "I have everything, Margaret. It's over." Margaret stood up slowly. She walked to the windows and looked out at the city. "Your father was always too clever for his own good. He found the discrepancies in the accounts. I tried to talk to him, to explain that the money was owed to me for years of work, years of building this company alongside him. But he wouldn't listen. He said I was a thief. He said he'd see me in prison. So you killed him." Rebecca's voice shook despite her efforts to keep it steady. "I eliminated a problem." Margaret turned around, and her face was different now. Harder. The grandmother mask had slipped away, revealing something cold underneath. "Your father was going to destroy everything. The scandal would have collapsed the stock price. Investors would have fled. The company would have died. I saved it by removing him. You murdered him, and my mother, and you tried to murder Robert Halverson." "Robert." Margaret's mouth twisted. "I didn't even know he was in the car until after. That was unfortunate. I like Robert, but he made the mistake of going into hiding instead of dying properly. I've spent 5 years looking for him." Rebecca felt sick. Margaret was confessing to everything, laying it out like a business transaction. No remorse. No guilt. Just cold calculation. "And me?" Rebecca asked. "Why try to kill me now? You could have done it years ago. You weren't a threat years ago. You were a child playing at CO, following advice, rubber-stamping decisions. I could control you." Margaret walked back to the conference table and picked up her tablet. "But then you started asking questions. Questioning the merger. Digging into old financial records. You were becoming your father all over again. I couldn't risk it. So you hired assassins. I hired professionals. There's a difference." Margaret swiped on her tablet screen. "And I would have succeeded if not for Robert's interference. He hired that bodyguard of yours, Felix. He's been sabotaging my plan for months. But it doesn't matter now. You've made this wonderfully easy by coming here." Rebecca realized her mistake too late. She'd been so focused on getting Margaret's confession that she hadn't considered Margaret might have her own plan. The boardroom door opened. 2 men entered, both wearing black and carrying guns with silencers attached. The same men from the hotel parking lot, or men who looked exactly like them. "You're going to disappear," Margaret said calmly. "Your body will never be found. The fraud investigation will conclude you fled the country to avoid prosecution. Your shares will go to the Trust One control. The merger will proceed. And in a year or 2, I'll retire with more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes." Rebecca's hand moved toward the panic button in her pocket, but the men moved faster. One of them grabbed her arm and twisted it behind her back. Pain shot up her shoulder. The other man searched her, finding the panic button and the wire. He ripped both away and crushed them under his heel. Did you really think I wouldn't scan for surveillance? Margaret shook her head. I've been in this business for 30 years, dear. I know every trick. Rebecca struggled, but the man holding her was too strong. Her training from James, all 2 hours of it, was useless against a professional. She was going to die here, in her parents' boardroom, just like they died on a mountain road. But then the window exploded. Glass shattered inward. James came through like something from an action movie, suspended on a rappelling line, gun drawn. He fired twice. Both men went down. Rebecca fell to the floor as the one holding her released his grip. Sarah Keller burst through the boardroom door, weapon raised. Margaretchen, you're under arrest for murder, attempted murder, and corporate embezzlement. Margaret stood frozen by the conference table. Her mask had shattered completely. She looked old suddenly, ancient and defeated. You can't prove anything. We can prove everything. Robert Halverson walked into the boardroom behind Sarah. He looked older than Rebecca remembered, with gray hair and a limp he hadn't had before. But his eyes were the same kind eyes she'd known as a child. I've been collecting evidence for 5 years, Margaret. Every transaction, every payment, every communication with your hired killers. I have enough to put you away for the rest of your life. Margaret looked at Robert, then at Rebecca, then at the shattered window and the unconscious men on the floor. Something in her expression cracked. I built this company, she said quietly. Your father would have been nothing without me. Nothing. I deserved that money. I deserved everything. You deserve prison, Rebecca said, standing up. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. And that's exactly what you're going to get. Sarah handcuffed Margaret while calling for backup on her phone. James helped Rebecca to a chair, checking her for injuries. Robert walked slowly across the boardroom and knelt in front of her. I'm sorry, he said. His eyes were wet. I'm sorry I let you think I was dead. I'm sorry I couldn't protect your parents. I'm sorry for all of it. Rebecca looked at this man who'd loved her parents enough to spend 5 years in hiding, hunting their killer. This man who'd hired James to protect her. This man who'd sacrificed everything to give her justice. She reached out and hugged him. He felt frail in her arms, like he'd aged a decade in 5 years. But he was alive. He was real. And he was family. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for not giving up. They stayed like that until the police arrived. 3 months later, Rebecca stood in the same boardroom, looking out at the city. The windows had been replaced. The blood had been cleaned up. The broken glass was gone. But the memory remained. Margaret was in prison awaiting trial. The evidence Robert had collected was overwhelming. The prosecutor said it was the most comprehensive corporate crime case they'd ever seen. Margaret would spend the rest of her life behind bars. The board had been restructured. David Torres had resigned when his connections to Castellano came to light. He'd been taking bribes to push for the merger. Patricia Hughes had retired. Martin Okoye had stayed, loyal and brilliant as ever. And 2 new members had joined. Robert Halverson, returned from the dead, and James Felix, former operative turned security consultant. The Castellano merger had died. Rebecca had found other investors, better partners, people who valued her parents' legacy instead of trying to dismantle it. The company was stronger now than it had been in years. Rebecca's life had changed too. She'd moved out of her isolated penthouse and into a house in the suburbs with a garden and neighbors who knew her name. She'd started teaching a business ethics class at the local college. She'd learned to be less careful and more cautious. There was a difference, as James had taught her. Speaking of James, he was leaning against the doorframe now, watching her think. He did that sometimes, disappeared when she needed him. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm okay." Rebecca turned away from the window. Just thinking about everything that happened. Sometimes it still feels surreal. That's normal. Trauma does that. They'd spent a lot of time together over the last 3 months. Professional meetings about security protocols. Personal conversations about life and death and trust. Rebecca had learned that James had a daughter named Lily, who was in remission from leukemia. She'd learned that he'd been an operative for a private military contractor before Robert hired him. She'd learned that underneath his professional exterior was a man who'd seen too much violence and wanted to build something better. Robert told me something yesterday. Rebecca said, he said you've been paying Lily's hospital bills out of your own pocket for years. He wanted me to know because he's been reimbursing you from company funds without telling you. James's expression flickered. He didn't need to do that. He did it because he feels responsible. The accident that killed my parents. Lily was in the other car, the one that Margaret's people forced off the road to cover their tracks. Robert has been paying for Lily's treatment as a way to atone for not stopping Crash. Rebecca walked over to James. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to stop pretending you don't need help. The company is setting up a medical fund for Lily and any other families affected by Margaret's actions. You're going to accept it, and you're going to stop carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. James looked at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. Okay. Good. Rebecca held out her hand. Also, I'm offering you a permanent position. Head of security. Salary, benefits. The works. You can work remotely when you need to be with Lily. You can set your own hours. But I want you on the team officially. You saved my life. The least I can do is make sure you don't have to kill yourself keeping other people safe. James took her hand. His grip was warm and solid. I accept, on one condition. What's that? You take self-defense classes. Real ones. 3 times a week. No excuses. If people are going to keep trying to kill you, and they probably will because you're inconveniently good at your job, you need to be able to handle yourself. Rebecca laughed. It felt good to laugh. It felt like healing. Deal. They shook on it. Outside the windows, the city spread out beneath them, full of lights and life and possibility. Rebecca's parents were gone. The company they built had been poisoned by betrayal, but she found a way to clean it out and start again. She found family in unlikely places. A man who'd faked his death to protect her, a bodyguard who'd become a friend, a board member who'd been secretly keeping watch. She'd found strength she didn't know she had. And she'd found justice for the people she'd lost. It wasn't the legacy her parents had planned, but it was a good one. It was enough. So here's the real question. Did you subscribe yet? Thousands of people will listen to this story and won't subscribe. Please don't be that person, Dot. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My dad said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show him that these tales matter. Please subscribe to this channel, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. And here's what I need to know. Do you want part 2?